Council, we'll call this meeting to order. For the record, it is Tuesday, February 18th, 2025 at 4:33 PM. We'll begin this afternoon's work session with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilwoman Little Roberts.
Here.
Councilman Overton.
Here.
Councilman Whitlock.
Here.
Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Mayor Simonson.
Here. Next up is adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
I move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted. Next up is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
move that we approve the consent agenda for the mayor to sign and the clerk to attest.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the consent agenda is agreed to. There are no items moved from the consent agenda, so we will go on to department commission reports. Item 23, which is proposed updates to Title II, and invite Ms. Kane to come up.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, council members, I'm Emily Kane. I'm a deputy city attorney, and I'm coming back to talk about Title II updates. As a follow-up to our discussion a couple weeks ago, I did receive two questions from Councilmember Cavanagh, so I can maybe jump in there. Okay. So the first question is, the Transportation Commission used to have an end time in their bylaws. And Commissioner Steed, or Chairman Steed, had some feedback for me about that. So the short answer to this question is that the Transportation Commission still does have an end time in their bylaws, so nothing changed there. The city code provisions in Title II and the commission's bylaws are two totally separate documents, and they have separate purposes. City code is about the establishment of commission's purpose, composition, and the roles of commissioners and staff. So it's the big picture of who, what, when, where, why. And then by contrast, the bylaws govern the internal functions, more of the how meetings are run, how elections are conducted, how subcommittees are formed. And so the code, which is what we're talking about today, has all the rules and expectations that council has for the commissions. And the bylaws are the internal rules that each group would use to govern itself. So we last did a big bylaws overhaul in 2016. So it's definitely time to do that again. The code contemplates that bylaws will be prepared by each commission and adopted formally by council resolution. We do that mostly for tracking so we can find them again. And that way they have a home and council knows kind of what's going on too. So one thing I would do differently in the next round of updates to the bylaws is I would avoid repeating in the bylaws what's already in the code. And that way changes to the code don't make a big difference between the bylaws and the code, or a big mismatch, and vice versa. So I did have an email exchange with Commissioner Steed about this toward the end of January. Some commissions have historically capped their meetings at 2 hours or at some length of time. That's always been addressed in the bylaws and not the code. So we're pretty much normal where we've always been. Transportation Commission caps theirs at 2 hours, and then others at 3. Parks and Rec decided to remove the time limit because they weren't running into that anymore. I have received a related question about bylaws from Historic Preservation Chair Blaine Johnston as well. He pointed out there were some outdated provisions in the bylaws, and totally aware of that. So I talked to him about the plan, which is that commissions keep operating under the parts of the bylaws that work. And then once Title II is updated and that dust has settled, we'll get everything matched up and do another kind of bylaws overhaul for all the commissions. So my plan is to prepare model bylaws that each commission could then customize and make work for them, which is kind of what we did last time. It's worked pretty well for 9 years. So, okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. How do the Title II changes impact MIAC, so the Meridian Youth Advisory Council? The short answer to that is that the code changes won't have any practical impact on MIAC. They won't notice any difference in their meetings or how they operate. The deeper dive is that as part of this Title II, as you know, it would have 4 categories of citizen working groups: our advisory commissions, statutory commissions, standing committees. So those are basically all the boards that council has or would name by name in the code, or that the law requires them to name in the code. And then ad hoc committees are basically everything else that's not named. So they focus on, as you recall, a specific objective or interest area. We've had the Dog Park Task Force, Precious Metals, UTV, the Meridian Anti-Drug Coalition is in this family, our UDC Review Committee, and then this is where MIAC falls as well. So membership in MIAC is informal. It's open to all Meridian students, grades 9 to 12, and it is, they do have a board, and that board kind of sets their quorum and needs to be there every time, but everyone else is just come as you are and come as you're able. So that's, that puts them more in the ad hoc category. So the extra deeper dive is that the code changes will help us answer questions that come up every now and then regarding whether open meeting laws, public records laws, governmental ethics laws apply to, for example, MIAC and its members. We've determined that ad hoc committees are subject to the Public Records Act and the ethics and government laws, but they're not subject to the open meetings laws. And this code would codify that. The reason that happens is because the statutes that control which of these laws apply to some boards and not others has a different subset that it focuses on. So the Idaho Public Records Act applies to local agencies defined as cities and any committee of the city. So clearly committees are subject to the Public Records Act. The Ethics in Government Act applies to governmental entities. And that term includes the term municipality. So that's everyone, the big, from council to commissions to committees. So those ethics and government laws do apply to ad hoc committees, including MIAC. But open meetings law applies to public agencies, which is defined by that statute as a city, sub-agency of the city created by or pursuant to statute, ordinance, or other legislative act. So the individual ad hoc committees, they're unnamed, they're just as needed. So they're not created pursuant to or by this code. So the open meetings laws don't necessarily apply to those. So staff convenes them when they need to. They give staff and sometimes elected officials the citizens' perspective on a particular subject area or feedback from a particular part of the community, but we don't notice their meetings or keep minutes or all the requirements of the open meetings law. So MIAC won't see any change in how it operates. That's how they're doing it now. We have determined over the years that MIAC's records are public records. Their members are bound by governmental ethics rules, which is, there's a lot of staff oversight there with their spending city money as well as other commissions. So there's training as needed, but there's no need to keep minutes or notice agendas. It just clarifies for citizens and for staff which laws apply. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome. For the questions I
Thank-
received, happy to.
Thank you, Emily. Council, any additional questions? Comments?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Excuse me. Thank you. As always, you bring a very brief but thorough approach to our work. And I feel like every time you're before us, I learn a little bit more. And so thanks for your patience with us following this kind of new process. Gives us an opportunity to digest all the information and ample time to provide questions. We really appreciate it. And happy early 29th.
Thank you. Thank you.
Council, any additional questions, comments? Well, Emily, thank you very much on these fabulous 50 edits that you've provided to us. And we look forward to many more edits that you're going to be making to more codes. But we'll put this on a future, this will come back for a public hearing. Is that correct on these?
Mr. Mayor, there's not typically a public hearing necessarily. It's just an ordinance update.
Council, how would you like a public hearing? I think that's the practice that
Our
you've
practice.
done. So we'll plan to bring it back for a public hearing for the public has anything that they would like to say about these items and move that forward as quickly as appropriate for our process. So
Okay, I'll take care of that.
thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Up next is our finance quarterly update from Mr. Lavoy. Unless you're not going to do a finance quarterly update that's on my agenda.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, appreciate the opportunity to present to you the quarterly update for February from finance. This is your kind of audit report. So these are going to be your actuals from fiscal 24 compared to the budget that we worked on 19 months ago. The audit report was delivered, signed today. So we will be presenting the audit report to you in the future. Again, we will work with the council to figure out a time that works for the auditor and you guys to present the official audit report to you, so you can ask the auditor any questions. This report here will be kind of the financial results in review. So again, today what we'll do is we'll go over the financials for fiscal 24. I'll let you know what the actuals did to your actual fund balances. Did they go up? Did they go down? By statute, we have to present to you the impact fee results independently. So this is my annual obligation to make sure we give you an update on your impact fee financials independent of the other financials. And then we'll give you an update on what our next quarterly report to you will be. So with that, let's jump straight into the financials. So first thing we're going to look at is the revenue streams for your general fund. So what this slide shows you is the general fund. The blue is our budget and our red is our actual. This will be consistent throughout all the slides. So all the slides will be developed the same way. So you can see the property taxes, we got 101.3%. So we missed the target by 1.3%. Our average for property tax over the years is 1% off. Again, it will never be perfect, but 1% we're very happy with. The overall general fund finished the year at 85.7% of our expectation. So we didn't get quite everything we were expecting. The largest difference that you see on this slide is 221%. That's all the way to the right in the revenue. And that's because of our investment income. Our investment income outperformed our budget. We were conservative on our budget, and this, I guess America is still getting good return on investment on their interest rates. So we're getting good returns there. The intergovernmental budget, you'll see it's, off by 50, it's only achieved 57%. 12 million of that is because of the ARPA fund. So again, we got the funds, we just haven't had time to spend it. So that's why it kind of looks funky. We have a big budget, we haven't spent it. Hopefully by next year, you'll see that gap close tremendously when we get to actually book the expenses and the revenue together. So that's why there's a big deviation on that intergovernmental. It's because of the $12 million in ARPA fund. Again, in the next many slides, you'll hear me state that the development growth revenues are down. You'll see expenses on the same thing. So again, you'll see that our impact fees, our development fees were lower than projected. Again, as we talk about revenues, property taxes is the #1 revenue source for the general fund. We need to make sure we manage that one prudently and responsibly. Again, we did miss the target by 1.3. I'm good with a 1% deviation on property taxes. But of all the revenue sources, that's the most important one, as you can see how tall the bar graph is compared to all the other ones. But those are your general fund revenues. Again, 85.7% in totality. Just some few talking points. I shared this with you and via email. Sales tax, again, is still coming in much lower than what we were accustomed to in the previous years. Fiscal 24 finished the year at 188,000 of new additional revenues in our available to us. You can compare that to years past. Again, this is the new norm, just like the email told you. I think we just have to change the way we think with using sales tax revenues. It's going to be probably in that 150,000 annual range as opposed to the previous years where it's just 600, 500,000. So just a different mindset. And those are your actual sales tax. The state liquor revenue again actually came in lower than previous year. So we got less money in 24 than we did in 23. Again, same thing with the email I sent you. I think it's just a different mindset we have to change. It's going to be pretty flat from here on out. We're not going to get a lot of new revenues to play with, quote unquote. It's going to be pretty flat compared to what we've been accustomed to. And then the final one is the franchise revenues. Again, 2024, we got less than we did in 23. As we've discussed in the previous presentations, we really don't have much control on this. This is a third-party kind of revenue source to us, so we get what we get. But for some reason, we got less in 24. We're hopeful we're getting a little bit more in 25, but again, the third-party corporations, they control this revenue source. But again, another revenue source that I don't think we should expect a lot of revenue from, maybe 50,000 to 100,000 of new revenues each year. Other than 24, we lost some money. But again, just reminding the talking points, again, we have a new norm now, I think, for the city of Meridian on some revenue sources that a few of us have become accustomed to being a little bit stronger. So those are your revenues. Again, we're good with how the revenues looked.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Schrader.
Thank you. Thank you, Todd. Maybe if you want to just spin back real quick to the revenues. So, I think council will recall there were a couple of council members that were interested in finding out if our property tax revenue results would exceed our projections, if we would end up having some savings there. And, now we've had some changes though in our intergovernmental revenue. So I was just curious, when you net out all of the changes for revenue, where do we come in on a total basis for general fund?
Great question. We'll do the math for you.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious because there was an idea about taking potential savings and putting it aside for safer, but we also had to borrow from new construction a little bit last year as well, which was a certainty. We knew that those revenues were going to come in. So I was just kind of curious if you could, and again, take your time, come back to us, but maybe provide us with some feedback on once you looked at all of that, kind of how that shook out.
We can definitely do that for you, Liz. And the last slide will show you,
Thanks.
did the general fund actually have excess revenues? And you'll find out the answer is no. We actually had to tap into, overall, we had to tap into the fund balance, but we'll get to that slide. So that's going to be a philosophical discussion. Just because you had extra revenues, but your total net income was a loss, do you really still have excess revenues? Yeah, philosophical discussion. So that gets us to now the expense side of the general fund. For the fiscal year 2024, when we compare our actuals to budget, we spent 93.8% of all budgeted dollars. I apologize, personnel, not operating is next, I apologize. For personnel, your department spent 93.8% of the budgeted dollars allocated to them. Our historical average is 93.9, so we're right there at average. Again, the largest gap was community development. You can see that they spent 83%, leaving 27% behind. And this was due to a slowing of growth and not filling the positions by decision. So they're trying to get a gauge of what's going on. So again, they knew that they were going to have some salary savings by not filling those positions. The largest dollar gap was 2.5 million. And that's associated to the SAFER grant in the fire department. Again, we knew that because we just brought them on in 2024. So we knew that we weren't going to spend all the dollars right away because we had a hiring runway we had to get through. And then the Parks Department, they spent 7.9% more than they were allocated. And again, we did review that with Steve Sidaway and the mayor, and we have discussed how to address those issues going forward. So again, but overall, the personnel budgets were spent at 93% of budget. That gets us now to operating. The operating side, the general fund on this particular item spent 57.8% of its requested budget. Our average is 82.2, and you can see the far left item is because of the ARPA grant, 11 million unspent, 1.5 million associated to 9 Mile Creek project, 1 million associated to the Linda Road overpass project. So again, we allocate the funds, but we haven't had the chance to put them in check form. So over a 2-year period, you'll probably spend 100% of the operating budget. We just need a little bit more time to spend those allocations that you gave to us. So hopefully those slides don't skew you too much. It's like, yeah, there's savings, but again, we just need a little bit longer window to spend those funds, kind of like a capital project. We can't get them always done in 1 year, but if you average it over the multiple years, you're spending 100% of your operating budget most likely. Then the comms department, they left 58.2% of the budget. That's because of development. They did not need to go to their third-party resources to pay for those inspections and reviews because we didn't have the permits coming in. So again, as the revenues fell, so did the expenses for that department. So they kind of work hand in hand, which is great. So those are your operating expenses. I know the graph kind of looks a little kind of not great, but that's because of all the grants and all the the funding that we put in place so that we can get those projects done in future years. And then that gets us to the last component, which is capital. We spent 56.2% of the money that you provided us. Again, we did request 10 million of the 10 million that we left on the books to be carried forward into this year to get it done. So you'll have a 100% expenditure rate over a 24 to 36 month period. That's just how capital projects go. You know, we did leave 10 million on the books, but we did ask to carry it into 2025. So overall, you will probably have 100% of that spent. Again, 2 million is for engines and 3 million was for golf course projects. Those are the kind of the larger ticket items of the 10 million. So general fund in review, again, good financial year for the city for 24. Again, revenues 85% of spent, personnel 93% of spent, operating 57 and capital 56. Again, with those two talking points for operating being grants as a primary function of that gap, and capital carrying up 100% of it over to fiscal 25. So now that you've seen how we've done from a budget to actual standpoint, question is, how did our fund balance get impacted? So the general fund had to tap into $1.1 million to balance the budget. With that, impact fund generated a profit of 8.6. Community development generated an excess revenue situation of 1.5. And you can go around, you can see where it happened. Again, general fund was the biggest deficit of minus 9.7 million. And that's going to be associated. You built a couple fire stations, you built a northwest precinct, and you built some parks. All things that we all knew that was going to happen. But again, we did have to tap into it. We did plan for that. We did present that to you. So I guess this goes back to the question for you, Liz. It's like, yeah, we spent 9 million, but you had excess revenues. Did you really have excess revenues? That's that philosophical discussion that we'll have to get into. It's like, I would say you don't have excess revenues because we had to tap into a revenue source. But we can talk about that as soon as maybe. Do we have the number, Jenny? Not yet. So we'll get back to you on that. So with that, your total fund balance for the city of Meridian, as you'll see on your audit report, will be about $99 million. 2.2 of that is non-spendable. That means we already have prior commitments to it. And this is all going to be in your audit report. It's online as well. 28 million is for restricted funds, pretty much the impact fee fund. 17 million is committed to capital projects.
You want to advance the slide so people can see what you're, was I assume that there's a slide that,
These are just talking points.
sorry.
I apologize. 21 million is assigned, and then 28 million is assigned for your reserves, leaving 1,093,000 for unassigned. So of the 99 million, 1 million is unassigned. Everything else is allocated for some purpose or not. So of the 99, you have 1 million kind of unassigned at the moment for the general fund. And with that, that is your general fund 2024 budget to actual and review. Any questions?
Council questions? Okay.
Thank you, Robert. So that we'll do the exact same thing for our enterprise fund. We do have to report both funds independently. Enterprise fund revenue sources. They finished the year at 106.9% of expectations, so they exceeded our expectations by 6.9%. The estimates for the water and sewer sales arrived pretty much at what we're shooting for, 103.3 and 106.4. So those are your water sales and your sewer sales. So those lined up where we wanted to. Like the general fund, you'll see the assessment, that's your development, your hookups. It's going to be lower than projected because we had slower growth than we thought. The other revenue difference is, again, related to our income, our investment income, just like the general fund. Our other revenue exceeded our conservative investment income projections. But overall, the enterprise fund was very strong in their revenues sales. Kind of like how we did for the general fund, this is your water and sewer sales year-over-year changes. So this is your new additional revenues you get from this one particular revenue source. So again, 2024, you had a good growth year with new customers coming online using water. So you added $1.9 million of new available funds to manage your operating expenses for the water and sewer sales divisions. And then the assessments, as we discussed, again, development is the driving factor here, and we lost $6.2 million compared to year over year 2023. So you can see that we knew it was going to be low, and again, 2025 we did the same thing. We have it in a declining growth pattern for the city of Meridian. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next presentation. Again, nothing too alarming here. Things are going along the path that we thought it would. It's going to be a declining growth pattern for the city of Meridian for the next 20, 30 years. We're still growing, just not at the pinnacle peaks that we got used to a few years ago. With that, we'll talk about personnel expenses. The enterprise fund, they did great. They ended up spending 95.6% of their allocated budget. Their historical average is 91%. I really don't have much to say other than awesome. So we'll get past that one. Operating expense, they finished the year at 92.6% of their operating budget, their average is 82. Again, another strong year. The biggest gap was in the wastewater department. They left about $709,000 on the table, or about 13%. Of which 360 is for their professional services carry forward for ongoing engineering consulting projects. So they carried those into next year. So if you put the 2 years together, they're pretty close to 100. And the same thing with public works. They have projects they can't get done in a fiscal year, so they ask us to carry the funds. So, but if you put the 2 years together, it's pretty close to 95 to 100% of their operating budgets that they spend. They just need 2 years to do it on some of their projects. So again, another good year for them. From a performance standpoint, capital expenditures, again, they spent 34.4% of their capital budget. That equates to $52 million left on the books. The enterprise fund did ask us to carry all $52 million into this fiscal year. So over multiple years, they will spend all the monies that you've allocated to them. Again, when I report to you from a budget to actual, it just doesn't look great, but they have the money, they've committed to it, they will spend it. They just need more than 12 months to get it done. So in summary, again, the enterprise fund, 106% of revenue. So they earned more revenue than we projected, and all their expenses are just a little bit lower than what we budgeted. So that's a great mathematical formula. High revenues, a little bit lower expenses. So they did great from that perspective. It's a good problem to have. So just like the general fund, we'll talk about how their enterprise fund was impacted. They increased their enterprise fund by 2.6 million. And the different component units that impacted that increase of 2.6 is displayed there accordingly. Unlike the general fund, they're not required to put their fund balance in certain categories. So at the end of the day, of their total fund balance of 112 million, all but 2 million is assigned or allocated to something. So again, all these dollars are already assigned or allocated to capital projects other than 2 million. So when you go on your online or see the audit report, you'll see everything but 2 million assigned for future projects. And with that, that is your enterprise fund.
Thank you, Mr. O. Are you done, Todd?
Yeah, for enterprise fund, if there's questions, I'm happy to stand for
Okay.
you, sir.
Council questions?
Just one quick question.
Councilman Cavanagh?
Todd, the revenue versus expenses with the enterprise fund, is this an anomaly? Is this a trend that we're seeing in terms of having excess revenue each year? It's a pretty high dollar amount. I'm just curious.
I apologize, Luke, when you say excess revenues
So your
in
next slide,
pattern.
if you advance slide one more, we got the $2 million, 2.6 million.
Okay,
So that's 2.6 million excess.
that is correct.
When we look back historically over the past 3 to 5 years, are we seeing the same amount-ish of revenue exceeding our expenditures, where we're carrying this amount of a fund balance? I'm only asking, just,
Sure.
you know, the right council, we don't have the ability to play with enterprise dollars. The idea is that the revenue that comes in offsets the cost of delivering the service. And again, I know that if there were to be a rate adjustment, it would be very minor, but I'm just curious if you and the department is looking at this and saying, hey, we're right where we want to be, or we're a little high, or we're a little low. I think that's the piece I'm just trying to get, is if this number that is coming in is what you expected, and if it follows a trend that we've seen over the past few years.
To answer the last part, does it follow the trend? The last 5 years, the enterprise fund has added to the enterprise fund every single year. And that's primarily due to the execution rate of the capital projects. So again, we are putting in the budget projects to be completed over a multiple year phase, like that
Okay.
$52 million number I kind of told you about.
Mhm.
So we're collecting those monies, putting in the fund balance, but again, all but 2 million of it's already allocated. So again, it's right where we want to be. We're budgeting, it's coming in where we want it to be. You know, does it kind of look different because we're leaving 52 million on the table? It doesn't look the greatest, but again, it's allocated, it's understood, they know what they're doing with it. I don't think it's out of line.
Okay.
The question is the user fees collecting enough monies to pay for the operating and the personnel? And that's a different discussion I'm happy to have with you. And again, no doubts that Lorelei and her team and us will be working on, do we need a rate increase for that? So again, you saw from the assessments, we lost 6 million compared to years past, and that number is going to go smaller and smaller over the years. And that's the hookup fees. The most important one is our user fees. That's the most important one we need to make sure we do right. And I'm sure we'll be standing in front of you with our analysis that says we need a rate increase or don't.
Got it.
So I don't think this is anything out of line. Again, we've added to the fund balance 5 years in a row.
Thank you.
And if I could add, it just goes to our say before we spend,
Yes,
if you
sir.
don't add to the fund
Yes,
balance,
sir.
you can never spend the necessary capital because you can't generate the capital in 1 year for any
Yes, sir.
project.
Yep. Yep, thank you. So with that, that gets us to the impact fee fund. Again, by statute, I must report to you on an annual basis how the impact fee fund did. Overall, your revenues for the impact fee collected 77.7%. Kind of goes in line with all the other development. We quite didn't hit the mark. Again, we knew this was going to happen with the slower development as we saw the permits come in throughout the year. Again, we will continually work with the growth committee to make sure we get these numbers dialed in and try to get them as accurate as possible. Each department I need to report on. So the fire department collected 83% of what they expected for their budget. Again, not surprising. We saw the development permit revenues come in lower, so we expect these to be lower. Again, revenues are lower here. The Parks Department working on their Discovery Park project. So again, they're carrying all that monies into fiscal 25, so they'll get that project completed. Even though they only spent 59%, 100% of that will be spent over the years. That gets us to the Police Department. Police Department, they spent 25% of what was carried into the budget. That project's now done. That's your Northwest Station. So again, we budgeted, they didn't spend it all. I think you've heard from Tracy and the team. They came in under budget. This just shows you they came in under budget for that particular project on that. So the question is, what, or then fire, I apologize, or the actual budget operating was 77%, capital 51%. We carry everything for capital into the next fiscal year, so they'll spend it over 2 years. And then what does that do to our impact fees? As I mentioned, they added $8.6 million to their fund balance. Again, this is part of the impact fee study. As Robert just stated, we save before we spend. This is that component of that financial management. We will spend these funds over the years, and you can see which agents or which departments added to the 8.6 million accordingly. So as a recap, I presented to you the fiscal year 2024 actual financial results against the budgeted dollars that you gave us. I presented to you the changes to the fund balances, and I also presented to you the impact fee fund results. With that, what will we present to you in our next quarterly update? We'll give you mostly just demographics and statistics. What's our population? What's our utility counts, our per capita? How are the permit sales going? Again, you'll see a couple slides later today. I have that information live. I think I sent an email to some of you. Then water usage and then contract information. So with that, that's your fiscal year 2024 year in review. And I stand for any questions. And Liz, I do have your questions still. We'll get to you.
Thank you. Council, any additional questions? Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you. And with that, we'll move on to item 25, which is the comprehensive financial plan updates.
Long time no see. Well, council, mayor, again, appreciate you giving us the opportunity to present to you the comprehensive financial plan. This is a new approach to how we're looking at the comprehensive financial plan. Your fellow council members, Liz and Ann, have been working with myself and the finance team and your directors and Robert to build a comprehensive financial plan. We put our request in there. This is a new concept of kind of giving you a presentation. Normally we ask you to read a paper that I hand out to you or go to a database. We're just taking that information and just presenting to you now in person. So we're going to try a different aspect instead of database or paper. How about we just stand in front of you and talk to you and just present to you what we believe is necessary for the city for the next 10 years from a capital, from an operating, from a personnel need to keep the level of service of where we expect. So for the next 5 workshops, this is workshop number 1 and 4 more after this, you'll hear from all your departments. Please engage with them, talk to them, ask them questions. We're presenting you information that we believe is necessary for the city to be successful for the next 10 years. Please note that the items all presented to you are not funded. Again, these are lists of needs. Again, and every department knows that we can't afford to fund every single thing. But again, this is our database that we use to maintain this information so we don't lose sight of it. We move things between years, but again, it's an opportunity for us to put inside a database to show you and communicate with you. This is where we believe the city needs to go. It allows Robert to see, hey, these are 397 requests that are inside the database that we need to somehow fulfill over the next 10, 20 years over time. So today's process or presentation, I apologize, I'll go over the CFP process. I'll kind of explain to you some of the development or finance challenges that we're working with when we come to the, quote, you heard the term balancing act, things that we believe that we have to take into consideration. Then you'll hear from the administration departments of their CFP request. And then you'll hear from the police department, their CFP request. And then we'll all stand for questions. Anytime, again, myself, Liz, and Ann, we've been part of this. Robert's been, again, we're all here to engage questions. So please, please, please ask. This was the CFP process that we took this year. I sent out a request to your directors, even sent out a request to you. Said, hey, please go into the CFP database and enter something enter the information that you need for the city between the years 2026 and 2035. That invitation was sent to the council and the directors, and they did that. Your departments did input the data. We collected all that data, and we built our first summary report, which I provided to Liz and Ann and Robert and directors. Said, this is what you guys told us that you need from this city for the years 2026 to 2035. So I put those data points together and provided a report. And then we had CFP meetings. Ann, Liz, some combination, finance, met with every department and said, let's discuss the items in the CFP that you presented to Todd in the database from steps 1 and 2. Dialogues occurred, things moved, items got shifted from one fiscal year to another. And those were the dialogues that occurred between Ann, Liz, myself, and the departments accordingly. After that, I created another summary report. Go again, now we've had all these changes, what does it look like? And that's what I did with the meetings between the legislative branch and the executive branch, and that's where we stand today with the CFP report, where it's at. The next 5 meetings, or actually next 4 meetings plus this, you're going to see visually what is in that database from the discussions from Ann, Liz, myself, directors, Robert. And so again, you're going to see the culmination of all those data inputs. And that's what's going to occur today and the next 4 meetings. Within that and after that, or actually still occurring right now, is what we call the balancing act. Our goal is with the balancing act is to, I guess, spur discussion. We know that we have more requests in the CFP than we can fund. We just can't fund them all. We have I guess you could say, an exercise to try to balance the first 5 years. Can we work together to figure out, start discussing, yeah, Brian, I know you want this, but to make this work, I need to kind of push that out 2 years. Or, John, I know you really want this, but I think we need to kind of move this request 2 more years so we can have kind of a balanced 5-year approach. The goal is with this balancing act is just to start discussion, start communication. We don't want to just show up one day and go, I guess I need to cut this. No, let's just start communicating, discussing it. And that's the goal of the balancing act, is try to do our best to say, I know you want 18 people, but I can get you 6 in the next 5 years. Okay, we're discussing it. Annually, you guys make the budget. So the ultimate buck stops with you guys at the end of the day. This is an exercise. This is just to communicate, and so that everyone's kind of informed what's coming down the pipeline or what's not coming down the pipeline. And let's just work together to figure out what do we want to prioritize over the next 5 years, because you can't fund everything in this 10-year project or program. So that's kind of the CFP process of where we've gone today.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Scher.
I thought maybe it would be good to chime in a little bit about that point. So, Ann and I and your city council liaison, I think in all cases have sat down with each director and gone through this process together. We already moved a lot of items. So you all received from Todd a pretty comprehensive listing of here are all the items and what was moved and why. Happy to always talk about those. In cases where we had a disagreement, or in cases where it just felt like it was something really critical, like public safety needs for PD, for example, things got moved around, but I think we were pretty trying to, when in doubt, we tried to lean on the side of putting it into this presentation, and people always have the ability as a director to come and advocate for what they think they need. But I think it's important for everyone to understand. So historically, the city of Meridian always tried to balance to at least a 5-year balanced CFP. This CFP that you'll see in the next series of meetings, it is not balanced to the 5-year. So I think one thing that we need to kind of all talk about is just what is our goal with the balancing act? I think from this sort of CFP committee's discussions, at least, what our goal has been is to try to balance it to the best of our ability. So if we find that we cannot achieve a 5-year balanced CFP, if we can achieve a 3-year balanced CFP, we'll certainly try to do that. To the extent that we take more of a, hey, here is a plan A, plan B kind of approach, I mean, that could be a good discussion too. But I think it's important to understand that the balancing act piece of it, that's really the making a plan together piece. So I think after all of these presentations, we all need to just kind of have a collective discussion. How do we want to do the balancing together? Do you want us all to try to make whatever decisions we can and then report back, hey, we could balance to a 3-year, here's what that looks like. Do you want to see alternatives, or do you want to just see, hey, you know what, we've always balanced to a 5-year, what would that look like? So I don't think there's going to be an answer right now on that discussion, but I just wanted to kind of frame that for everybody, because as we're going through these meetings, I don't want everyone to feel totally reassured that everything you're about to see can be funded, because I think you heard now from Todd, now you've heard it again from me, I'm sure you'll hear it from Ann, that that's not the case. So, and particularly as we're having dialogue with directors, if as a result of those discussions, we end up deciding, hey, this is something that can wait, this is something that can be pushed out, or there's a different way, I think most of those conversations have kind of been had as a screening process already, but to the extent that we do find that through dialogue, that is also helpful in balancing. So I don't know if anyone had thoughts, but I just wanted to throw that out there that, the goal will be to balance it to the best of our ability and to work with the mayor and work with Todd to try to come up with kind of a good plan or options. But I just wanted people to understand that what you're about to see is not fundable at this point.
And if I could also just add in, it also doesn't reflect my priorities or a collective discussion with all the directors, which has been our traditional process. When we all talk together about what the department's various needs are, which is part of the budget that we will bring forward to council at some point in time. So it is informational. It is part of the discussion. It may or may not be reflective of priorities come budget time from whatever I present, but you'll have the information. If you don't like what's presented, you're more than welcome to use this information to bring forward alternatives. But ultimately, when the budget comes forward, you'll get a presentation that will have the support of, I would like to say, majority of the executive and team that may or may not look like this document. Councilman Taylor.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, maybe a question for Todd or anyone that can answer it. It's sort of a historical question about, and Councilwoman Strader mentioned about the challenge of trying to find the balance at the 5 years. Have we ever had a process where we saw in 1, 2, or 3 years where we felt like the priorities were balanced, and then it became harder in maybe years 4 and 5, or maybe we didn't even look at it that small of a window? I'm just kind of curious, just knowing the challenges of trying to balance it, knowing that most of these things we can't fund everything that's presented. Have we found any success in looking at a shorter window of saying we can balance these requests with what we know? I'm just kind of curious historically if that's ever been kind of where we are with that.
Fair question, Doug. So again, the CFP has been implemented, I think, 4 to 5 years with the city. Yeah, so it's still a relatively young project where we've actually got everything moving. Again, we started this project 8 years ago, 9 years ago, starting to collect the data, but not until I'd say 4 or 5 years have we actually tried to do this balancing act. And we have been successful in the past of balancing 5 years. It's just this particular time around, it's just a little bit more difficult. You'll hear from the challenges in the next few slides of what's impacting us. As Liz stated, if it's only 3 years, it's 3 years. If it's 2 years, it's 2 years. If it's 1 year, it's 1 year. It's an exercise. It's an exercise to discuss so we don't just show up the next year without discussion.
And I think that's relative as well. Balancing occurs by just moving things out to years without, in a lot of ways, regard for whether or not the department thinks it's a priority or not. I mean, that is how this has been balanced in the past, where we use it from the fire conversation a few years ago. The positions were just not put in the 5 year because it could not be funded based upon what they wanted to do. And you rarely bring in 1 firefighter, 2 firefighters, 3. You bring in a station of firefighters, and it couldn't be balanced based upon those type of things. So they weren't put in the CFP as an example. So yes, we've balanced, but we've just balanced by moving things outside the 5 years because it was never meant to be the directive of, it was just really to identify what was on the horizon and what people were identifying as a need.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilwoman Schrader.
I will say, in the discussions, what we did try to do this year was, and I'll give parks as like a shining example, where we tried to really go deep on understanding, for example, when parks would actually operationalize as opposed to when they would be completed, things like that. So we did, I think as a committee, we did work really hard together with the city council liaisons and the department directors to try our best to kind of come up with a realistic roadmap that still met their needs, but tried to go pretty deep on timing of items. So I think hopefully that helps people kind of understand at least the process that we went through. And we did take a significant amount of time to kind of go do that.
Thank you. So to go along with what Robert just mentioned, the annual budget will be what defines the budget. The CFP is a tool that gives us a list of items or requests to choose from. So that is the overall purpose of the CFP, is a collection of data so that we know what to pick from. What Robert or what mayor or what council prioritizes, whole different discussion. But as Robert said, at the end of the CFP, he will present a budget to you, whether it mimics the CFP. Completely agree. And that is going to be true. Every single year that's true. The CFP is just a tool. It's a document that gives you a guide of what's available or what your subject matter experts have put in for the next 10 years. It's always fluid. It's always moving. A couple of years ago, we had an instance, I think Robert called me, it was after budget workshop 1, hey, we need 9 SROs. Okay, well, let's make the change happen. We have to be able to be fluid. It's never adopted. It's a guiding document. If you ever hear anybody says, well, if it's in the CFP, it's funded. Completely false statement. There's no guarantee to anything being funded in the CFP. It's always a fluid document. The executive branch has input. The legislative branch has input. Like I said, it's a guiding document. Our goal is to have that balancing act discussion. Yeah, we can't do 2 fire stations at one time. Well, we can do 1 station and 2 police officers. Cool, at least we had the conversation. And that's the point of the CFP that we're trying to drive. So again, just kind of some of the processes, again, appreciate the conversation on this so far, but that's kind of what the CFP processes look like to date. Next few slides are the impacts, the challenges, insert the term you want to create here. But these are the things that we're taking into consideration as we're doing the balancing act. We know growth is slowing down. One-time revenues are for one-time expenses. We've always used that financial management philosophy. We do not want to rely on one-time revenues to pay for ongoing expenses. Not a good financial policy, in my opinion. So again, we are putting that into our forecasts in the balancing act. So again, less permits equals less revenues, but that also means that you have less needs. So again, if we're not growing as fast, we don't need the resources as fast at times. Some of the challenges we have is the lack of funding. We have a SAFER grant we're trying to manage. We have some opportunities of funding. We have a rural dissolvement that's going to occur in a few years, so that's awesome. We don't know what the state's going to do, so that's always a wild card. So again, not only do we have negative revenues, but we have some positive revenues coming down the path. So we have those in the forecasting balancing act. We have been talking to departments about reviewing what we're doing today. You'll hear me talk about this more in our presentation. But is what we're doing in fiscal 26, the right thing for the city? Just because we did it in 1999 doesn't mean it's what we need to do today, or is it what we need in 2027, 2028? Look at technology. Again, technology is improving. How can we do operational efficiencies to help, maybe move some of these requests? Like Robert said, we move things around in the CFP. It's true. Are there operational efficiencies that we can use to delay some of these requests? Are the things that we're doing today in alignment with where we want to go with the city strategic plan? You'll hear a term called priority-based budgeting. I'm going to use it in my presentation for finance. Again, what programs, what activities, what services, what policies, what procedures, what are we doing? Let's take inventory of it. Is it what we need to be doing? Just ask the simple question. Just because we've always done it this way doesn't mean it's the right way. Or you'll hear another term, well, if it's not broke, don't fix it type of thing. It's like, no, not necessarily. I mean, at least ask the question. It's 2026, not 2006. Let's just ask the questions. So you'll hear that's coming down the right path. So we put all these things into our balancing act discussions, trying to figure out what's the best method that we can fund all these requests and continue to do what we're doing. Again, the challenges you've heard us talk about. This is your single family and multifamily unit sales. It's going, we're still growing. This is a growing chart. I know it's tough to say that or look at that, but it's a growing chart. It's just at a declining rate. So again, you can see since 2018, we're growing just at a slower rate. This is going to occur for the next, again, according to our numbers, the next 20 years. This is an email that I sent out recently. This is as of last month. Period to date, if you can time travel today, every single year, February 18th, or it's the exact point in time, you can see 333 residential permits compared to years past. That's going to be our second lowest since 2015. So again, not the greatest strength that you've seen, but again, we're still growing very nicely, just at a different clip that we got used than what we've been used to. Again, we're still growing. We sold 31 multifamily units at the same point in time in years past. Again, we're still growing, just not at the same growth clip. So we're putting these impacts into our forecast. And this is the forecast that we're using for your permit sales and unit sales for multifamily and residential. Again, it's growing at a declining rate. And we're hitting these targets based on our growth projections. We're off by like 3 to 4% on residential. Multifamily has been tough the last few years. We've had some spikes that we didn't expect. But like I said, that last slide, we had 31 multifamily. We're not going to make the target this year. So these are the impacts that we are managing, the challenges that we're managing in our balancing act for the next 5 years. You've seen this as new construction. It's going down. I mean, the county controls this. We get what they give us, and we're still growing just at a declining rate. Another factor you've heard me talk about is public safety's percentage of property tax. So what we do is we take all their personnel costs, add them all up, and then we say, what percentage of property tax do they consume? We want to see this pretty flat. If you see it grow, that means they're consuming more of that primary revenue source for the general fund, and we have to be considerate of that. We are now at almost 100% of property taxes going to public safety. As you can see, for a good 15, 20 years, we're sitting there at 85, 75 to 80%. Just recently now, we're just getting closer to 100%. To me, that's very difficult to manage. And these are the challenges that we have in our next 5 years to figure out how do we manage that 25% consumption gap between 75% when they ran for a good 6, 7 years to now almost 100%. So these are the challenges that we're using in our CFP Balancing Act. Again, another way of looking at it, if you like numbers. So again, in 2014, it was 72.58% of the property taxes that we collected, we allocated to public safety. We're now at 96.36%. And, just if you want to look at 2014, fire consumed 31%. They now consume 41%. So they've now consumed 10% more of our property tax. Police was 41% in 2014. Now they're 54% in 2024. That's 13% increase. So again, these consumptions of our primary revenue sources is our challenge that we have to help you guys manage to figure out what do we do with the other revenue sources and how do we pay for all the other departments? Because property taxes are being consumed now 100% by 2 departments, which in years past it was 75%. I had 25% to allocate to you guys. So with that, that is the CFP process. The next 4 presentations, 4 workshops, it's going to be kind of the roadshow. We're going to show you, we're going to tell you what we're going to do. Please engage your subject matter experts, ask them questions. It's our chance to visually tell you our story. And please engage with us. You're going to hear from Streetlights next, City Hall, Finance, HR, Utility Billing, Legal, IT, other government, and then police. That is your agenda for tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions, or Liz and Anna are happy to answer any questions about process before we get into the roadshow.
Council, questions, comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Schrader.
Just maybe one comment. I think this at least helped me to crystallize and understand, Now, no one has a crystal ball, right? No one actually like Todd, the growth committee, no one actually has a crystal ball and can say definitively, this is what will happen in the next 5 years. But they have a pretty good track record and they have a lot of visibility into at least an accurate sense of permitting. And for me, I think what has crystallized this for me is, at least I think as of fiscal 2025, we were recognizing almost $1.5 million of new construction revenue. And in the end of the 5-year period, what are you projecting? I believe it's like $600,000.
Well, in 26, we'll be down to, fiscal 26, we'll be budgeting 1 million even. And then we have $300,000 reduction every single year for the next 5 years after that, based on the track record and the historical data of growth, slowing growth. But that's what we're projecting. And we have data that shows that we've gone down about $300,000 every year for the last 4 years. So we're using that data as our tracking. We're using the growth permitting unit sales. We're saying, are we still following that declining growth model? The answer is yes right now. So we're not going to change our approach that, oh, we need to now go up to $2 million, because we're not seeing that data that says we're growing at 2020, 2016 numbers again. Until that occurs, then we'll adjust it. But right now we have everything growing at a declining growth model. So 300 grand every year for the next 5 years. So we'll be down to $500,000 in 2029. Yeah. We're still growing. That's great. We're just not used to that. We got used to 2,000 permits,
change.
2,500 permits. I think Boise would love to have 900 permits a year. We're just not used to that.
Okay.
Thank you. So first up is going to be streetlights. Thank you.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Before we jump into these presentations.
Okay.
Just a couple quick comments for council. And Todd, I appreciate that you kind of called this a road show. And so I'd encourage council, we should be looking at all this information that's being presented to us, much like a map. This isn't turn by turn directions. We don't necessarily need to be jumping into what's going to be proposed in 2034. We want to look at this all holistically. And then if you have some specific questions about something that is on the CFP 3, 4, 5 years from now, work with the council liaison, work with the department director to get that greater understanding. Otherwise, we'll be here until fiscal year 2027. We want to be respectful to our many employees that are here. And so just that would be my encouragement. Let's process the information. Don't need to dive in deep into each one of these like if we're in a budget.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
another quick clarification as we enter this is a tool. Having participated on the other side in this tool for many, many years, this is a tool for the departments as much as it is for us. And when it first started, no one was concerned if you're sitting, I'll use the police department, naturally. We weren't concerned with what building permits looked like or what the city was doing. The task given to us was, what do we need? What do we think? And it started at a department level, not a big department, I mean the individual department, CID, patrol, community services. What do you see yourself needing? It then allowed them to build their future. There was no aspect of, oh, I want you to consider what our revenues look like while we're doing this. That's not playing into how this tool is designed. It was designed based on needs. So of course, there's going to be a lot of changes. If income doesn't perform up to the level of the requests, then we're going to have to make changes. But what you're going to see and hear, I'm sure, is we're going to hear from all the different departments on what, based on historical data, based on needs, based on growth, what they think they're going to need and why. But there's not really a nexus between what we think growth is going to be and what we think those needs are. We're going to be forced to have to make those decisions based on how much money's in the pot and how much we can do.
Thank you.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. So I don't know if I'm lucky or unlucky to get to go first, but here we go. So we have three main streetlight requests that are in the CFP. The first one is streetlight upgrades to LED. This is a annual funding request. Currently, we have $260,000 per year. We're making really good progress in this program. By the start of FY '26, we'll have about 28% of the bulbs remaining as HPS. So we started with much higher number and we're working our way down. At our current rate of funding, we actually think we'll be done by FY '31. And so this number in the CFP could be adjusted. And then that money could be used for something else. If you wanted to leave it in streetlights, it could be used for our next request, which is adding new streetlights. So we call that our supplemental projects. So this is where we highlight underserved areas. So these are areas of town that were developed before street lighting standards were in place. So our current annual budget is about $100,000 per year. That is split between the base budget and the CFP, so that's why that number doesn't exactly match up. But $100,000 per year allows us to put in about 6 lights. We focus on areas near schools, parks, walking routes, and we're currently working on trying to put together a 20-year plan that would address all of the deficient areas in the city, because that is going to be a pretty big funding thing. So we need to spread it out over that time span. And our final streetlight CFP request is for a CFP or a streetlight program administrator. Currently, we have a half-time FTE allocated to street lighting. The program has grown by 175% if you just take in streetlight counts since Public Works took over managing it in 2010. And that's okay if we want to just stay where we're at with the program, but with that limited resource, we can't really accelerate and do more LED lights or more installs. But eventually you'll see at build out, we will have upwards of 29,000 streetlights. And so at some point between now and 2074, we probably need to add additional staffing to this. We're fine with it in FY '31, but at some point we're going to need to add additional staffing to our streetlight program. And oh, I guess I get to keep going. We have a couple of facilities requests in the CFP. This is currently sitting in FY '26, but what we are doing is we're waiting for the result of our energy study to determine if this is a project that should go forward or shouldn't. It has been pushed out for a while. So generally they recommend that you tune and rebalance large HVAC systems over their lifespan. They do expect that to result in an energy savings on the heating and cooling costs. But again, we want to wait till we're finished with our energy study. Just a quick update on that. We did receive approval from the Department of Energy on the grant we applied for at the end of last year. So we're hoping that that moves forward still. And we're putting together an initial kickoff meeting and we'll hopefully have results this next year for that. So I'd expect this one probably will get pushed from FY '26 when we actually come forward for the budget. Our next one is out in FY '31. This is a tenant improvement request for the City Hall Historical Center. This would be a one-time cost, but this is also pending the results of the space study that you guys had us do. So the thought would be that when the historical center relocates to the library, the space could be utilized by the community development department. It could be a really good easy access space that's right at the front of City Hall for people to come in and do their permits, building plans, those kind of things. It shifts their customer facing staff just to the very front of the building. But again, waiting on the space study, quick update on where we're at on that is we've done all of our initial assessments with the consultant, and they are putting together options, and hopefully we'll see a report in the next month or so. So this request is out in FY '31. It is a placeholder for 5 janitorial staff. And the thought would be to bring janitorial services in-house. So this is something that we contract out. We go out to bid every 5 years on a janitorial contract. That number continues to just get bigger and bigger. So this is something that at some point it might make sense to bring those FTEs in-house and do the work ourselves. So we run that analysis every couple of years with finance to determine if we're at that breaking point where it makes sense to bring in-house. We also need to kind of consider it's a different type of staff than we're used to and staffing model than we're used to. So some of our concerns is would we be able to actually hire and keep staff on hand? But I think eventually this will be a really good model and will save us money. But it's out in FY31 just as a placeholder. Our current contract is a 5-year contract through 2027. So we'd likely look at it again towards that 2027 timeframe. Okay, any questions?
Council, any questions? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, appreciate the opportunity to present to you the next 5 requests. I'm going to represent finance, HR, utility billing, and legal. All of our requests are support services requests, and they're all kind of placeholders 5 years out. I'm going to represent HR and finance first. You're aware of a big project called Workday for us. We don't know what we don't know yet. So Debbie and I are going to deploy that first. Then we're going to take an inventory of what programs, activities, services, policies, procedures. What are we doing with Workday? Ask the question, do we need to continue doing it? Challenge our team members, go, is this the right thing with Workday or without Workday? We just don't know what we don't know yet. So again, we put these in here as placeholders. We have to figure out what Workday is going to do for us. Let us right size with the staff, with the software. Then we may come back to you with a staffing solution. But we think we need at least a year or 2 to figure out what does Workday do? How does it impact our policies, procedures? Just because we've always done it this way doesn't mean it's the Workday way now. So these are the challenges that we're going to ask of ourselves over the next 2 years. Utility billing, even though we're growing utility accounts every day, Carrie and her team are doing operational efficiencies to push this out another few years. Again, it's really dependent on growth, demand. Can we continue to find operational efficiencies in the utility billing department to push this out? So we just keep pushing it out by finding other efficiencies. And the same thing with legal. Legal has a staff member in here. It all depends on the workloads. Let's see what's going to happen. It's outside the 5-year window. He's going to analyze. He has a new team member this year. Let him figure out what the new baseline is. If he needs it, he'll come to you as a request. So again, we did put these in here for really placeholders. We're going to all try to find operational efficiencies within our own departments before we stand in front of you and ask for a staffing request. So all 5 of these are outside the 5-year window, but they're all kind of in the same need of let us figure out what we need before we stand in front of you so we can operationally figure out what our departments need. And happy to answer any questions on the support services kind of staffing requests.
Todd, can you confirm or deny that Workday will solve all of our problems?
I can confirm to deny that it will not or will. No. Yeah, we don't know what we don't know. We're hoping for great things.
Okay.
Thank you, Robert.
Council, any questions for Todd that are serious? Okay. Bill, did you want to talk about yours? Is yours contingent upon Workday?
Mr. Mayor, the attorney position?
Yeah.
No, it really is just a growth related. I don't think it's Workday related. No.
Okay, so just in case there's any, just so we're clear on that, the other is where let's wait and see what Workday does. The attorney, though, is not based upon the Workday in terms of it may or may not be warranted for other purposes. Okay.
Good evening, members of council and mayor. For the IT department, we have a handful of requests in here. Just like to say, first of all, we know there's some hard years ahead of us. Nothing is set in stone at this point, but we want to make you aware of at least what we project needs to be. So the first request we have in here is for communications infrastructure extensions. This is to continue to improve and expand our communications infrastructure or fiber across the city. And that's the kind of the core communication backbone for all of the facilities across the city. This is one-time funding spread across 5 years. So it's $200,000 the first year and then $100,000 after. If you recall from fiscal year 25 budget, we did get $640,000. So this is continuing that effort. We are looking to provide redundancy in certain locations, but also to build out where we can so that we can reduce the cost of leased lines that we use across many facilities currently. So we do these projects in conjunction with Public Works and ACHD to help reduce costs and hopefully reduce impact as well to our citizens. The next request we have is for a position, and I'll just start out saying that most of our positions in the IT department have a direct correlation with growth throughout the city, meaning city employees. As we add employees, typically we have more demand for service. So this one is no different. This is a GIS position. As over the years, we've had continued growth in the city. We've had more demand for GIS services. And as we have worked with those systems, we've also made a lot of improvements to our GIS system. So we've done automation, we've done more analysis and integrations and whatnot across the board. And with that has come complexity that we also have to manage. So it's a balancing act of, okay, we have requests that come from departments. We also have a system to manage and keep up to date. At some point, it's a tipping point where we say we need another person to help manage the requests that come in the system as a whole. And we feel like that time is upon us. So that's why we have this in here. I will mention that the last time that the city added a GIS position was in fiscal year 2012. So it's been a little while. At this point, this position, we don't anticipate being funded in FY26, but it's before you regardless, just as a informational. The next position or next request we have is also a position. It's for a data reporting analyst. So this would fulfill many department needs as that we get for reporting needs. As you know, we continue to build or purchase more complex systems across the city for managing different operations, whether that's in our department or other departments. And oftentimes there's a need to gather data from that and produce helpful reports or dashboards or other things. And as we have done that, we have found that we are regularly getting requests for those types of needs to gather data and information. And quite frankly, it's beyond most people to get all that information out. It can be really complex. So this is would be part of our software engineering team. That's who currently manages those requests right now. But again, it is at the point where we expect in the next few years, we'll need another person to handle that capacity, that workload, or in turn, employees that are requesting those services will just end up waiting longer, which may end up being what it is. So the last time we added a position in our software engineering group was in FY20. So this is about an 8-year gap. We expect somewhere around the 5 to 7 year range for a software engineer at this point based off of prior history. So I will say that as we have added some other capabilities in the last couple of years, specifically dashboards via Power BI that we do, that has also, again, increased demand for those because they provide a lot of great visuals that help people make data-driven decisions, which is helpful. So you just see that continuing to grow. Okay, now we get into a little bit of a murky area here. So I will say when it's 5 years out, we feel pretty comfortable. When it gets past that 5-year mark, it's really a lot of projecting and guesstimating. So based off our historical trend, we anticipate a support specialist being needed around the year 2030. It could be a little bit later. But our support specialist is really the primary technical support for everyone across the city. Right now we have, in our service test team, we have 5 individuals, including one that's a supervisor. And again, based off of trends, as the city grows, we typically see a demand for more technical support. Now, obviously, if the city's gonna, not add staff as fast, this need will probably get moved back because we won't see that need as soon. But that is where we're at currently. The next position that we have is for 2032, and this is for an infrastructure engineer, and this is more on the back end of things. The last time we had a position in this space was in FY '23. So again, it's kind of longer than our service desk team because we don't add things as quick back there or on the back end, right? So this is servers, storage, network, all the cloud apps that we deal with and support, and cybersecurity. So currently, we anticipate it being about 2032, but that could fluctuate depending on how the city grows and whatnot. So. And I think that is it for the IT department. I will stand for any questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions for Dave?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
Thanks, Dave. This was really helpful. You mentioned on the GIS analyst specifically, now you weren't sure if it would make sense in FY '26. Did you want to move that in the CFP or do you still feel like that's a good placeholder? I just kind of was curious if something changed or if maybe you can go back a little bit. No. Yes. Maybe it was a GIS analyst or it could have been maybe the one before that, but you sort of mentioned you didn't know if FY '26 made sense.
Gotcha. Okay, I don't recall that specific thing. We do anticipate this one being a need
Mhm.
Immediately because again, just based off of the demands for service and what we're managing currently, we don't feel like, at this point, it's something that can wait. But at the same time, we also know the financial situation with everything. And from my understanding, at this point, I don't anticipate this being funded. So that's what I was saying.
Oh, okay. Mr.
So-
Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but the need is an FY '26 need, which I think goes to Councilman Overton's point. I think everyone's interested in understanding the true need in terms of the timing, so it's helpful for us and then we'll figure it all out, right? But thank you.
And I think it's good one that we stop. This is one that I know the directors will talk about. Because I think they're going to have a decision to make. Do they feel like they can live with the current level? Look at the projects. What's more important for them? Another position within the city or someone else to do more GIS? That's perfect example of a conversation that will happen with the directors. We'll look at the list of projects that are there. We'll look at the list of projects that are in the future. Is there enough to sustain a full-time position moving forward, or what will be the impacts if it doesn't? So great example.
Thank you for the question.
Any additional questions or comments for Dave? All right.
Thank you.
One Dave leads to another.
Dave Squared. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here for the communication specialist, budget request. Won't spend a lot of time. You've heard this back in the current fiscal year budget request back in June of last year. It's been an ongoing need for the last several years. Need still exists in this budget year. This is a budget request that's now in 2027. Really, as the work continues to grow, the city continues to grow, it continues to be a need for communication services. Overall, just more demands on the staff. It keeps us from, while we chip away at the proactive things that we can do, that we want to do, the earned media and training our employees, we're really just focused on the existing work that we are doing today to keep up with the media requests and everything else associated with that. So this is a request for a communication specialist now in 27. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
I think I'm still here. This next request is for $14 million downtown parking garage placeholder. As conversations continue around parking needs in downtown and studies of parking downtown, this project would satisfy long-term needs. Really, the goal with this one is to utilize public-private partnerships. So this is a placeholder with that intent in mind, to find the highest and best use to where we would place a parking structure, still to be determined, size, et cetera. The figures that are shown are based on the figures that historically over the last 5 years, we've estimated roughly $35,000 per parking space, gets you roughly 400 parking spaces. That's the math that's behind this right now. Happy to stand for any questions on this one as well. I know this is one that's just an ongoing conversation.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Schrader.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious, just from the perspective of how do we evaluate when we're at the point that we know there's this need? I'm kind of curious about the timing with this because it feels like something like parking is a tough concept. So is there any kind of metric that we're monitoring with this or any kind of listening to feedback from business owners, or is it kind of anecdotal like that? Or how are we kind of monitoring the timing of this?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Strayer, I think this is one that's a little more subjective, based on feedback from the downtown business owners, based on feedback from the planning department and their parking studies that they're continually working through along with the parking committee groups, and really looking for a private opportunity with a partnership. I mean, if something were to come along tomorrow, I think the city's in a good position to take advantage of potential opportunities to cost share. So I think 2027 it's a best guess on all of those things coming together at the right time. That's at least my opinion.
Yeah, and if I could add to it, I think part of this is, based upon the space study that we do, what's the number we need for our needs versus what's the number that can help ensure we don't have a problem with downtown parking for the foreseeable future. But I think this will be part of the destination downtown conversation as well. As people talk about how much they want to put parking meters in downtown or have paid parking, well, this can do it. We also have an urban rural district which is expiring, and parking will become part of our forte unless we find another way to deal with it. So this could parlay into that conversation, but it's generally been anticipated to meet our needs so we don't impact our neighbors downtown. And if you look at the CFP, we currently have surface parking, and we're not adding more people, so it's not as direct today as it could be if we were having 10 more people come into City Hall, but that may push that conversation a little quicker.
Thank you.
All right, so this one is for the 9 Mile Creek Restoration Project. While this shows as a cost to the city, there's also an offsetting revenue that would come either in a combination of MDC funds or FEMA federal grants. So the city's part is really just helping manage this project and manage that administration. Just as a quick reminder, this is an important project for downtown that would basically pipe and redo the 9 Mile Creek through downtown. It would remove 78 acres and 41 existing structures out of the special flood hazard area, which will really help revitalize development in the downtown area. So quick status update. We are currently finishing final design. We expect to finish that in the next couple months. And then we would we'd get a new engineering estimate with that final design, and we'd rerun project ROI costs for phase 2 or for construction, and then go back if we're still pursuing the FEMA grants, go back to FEMA and solicit funding for that phase 2.
Thank you.
Nothing like having the last one. So Mayor and Council, here on this last item here, this is a future funding request that we have in the budget for fiscal year 2033. This is for our prosecution team. For those that don't know, or for those online that are watching, our prosecution services are currently done by contract. We've had a contract with the city of Boise since 2002. It's worked very successfully. We've pared down some of the work over the last couple of years, and they handle prosecution only. So everything else is being done by my office and my team directly, whether it's providing police services, police advice, training, everything with the police is being done by our team currently, but the prosecution services are still being done through the contract with the city of Boise, as well as with the court. Fun fact, this August, 40 years ago, I started as the Meridian prosecutor. The way we do prosecution today, other than the improvement in technology, is about the same. Still takes humans, still takes people to physically go to court. It's driven by the court scheduling. It's driven by the way the judges are scheduled. It takes a person per courtroom to manage that. So those are things that are has always driven what this impact could be when you have it, because you're talking about prosecutors, attorneys, support staff to process all the paper, all the work that goes into that, and then physically being in court every single day from potentially 8:30 in the morning till whatever the court ends for the day in that particular courtroom. So there is a lot of lift to get there. And that's kind of what we've always looked at this. I mean, there's a lot of lift to get there, to start this, to transition to our own team will take some time. So that's why we've sort of pushed it out on the far edges of this exercise, but it's certainly on our radar. It's certainly something for the future. We've been very fortunate with our ongoing contract that we've had a good relationship and good service that we've been receiving. Because with most contracts, again, you're always looking at price and service. And the price of doing it between the cost of personnel and such that the city of Boise has all those costs of personnel, and we are only paying a contractual part of that and not all the ongoing costs of healthcare and retirement and everything else that goes with it. It's a little bit different impact to us. We look at it from the future. Again, we can certainly may find some efficiencies, but probably not going to be that much different. It's still going to take the humans. So we're still got it on our radar. We still have it intended as a future need that we will be able to address as needed. And we want to be in front of it. We don't want the situation to arise like we did with the state and our buildings department side, where they simply just opted not to do it any longer. I don't anticipate that in the near future. So it is something that we can help keep kind of in the conversation and make sure that if we want to do this, we'll have time to plan it and do it properly and then transition to something like this at a point in time when it's necessary. Anything else?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Bill, on this particular one where it's kind of to the mayor's earlier point, right? We don't hire one firefighter, right? We hire a station.
Right.
I don't necessarily see this the same way, but I'm curious if you do. And when you look at the start year, would you anticipate all 6 in the vehicle that year? Is it beginning the process to build up to 6? Help me understand what your vision is from what the CFP request is in terms of the totality of the FTEs.
Yeah, great question, Councilmember Cavanagh, Mayor and Council. It really is more like a fire station. I mean, in trying to look at this, can we do this incrementally? Can you add a little bit at a time, take over a portion, contract some of it, maybe do it in pieces? It's really complex to do that, and it's really difficult with the prosecuting agencies to say, we'll only do this much if you can do that much. Both of them have never really been very interested in trying to do it that way. It's a little more complicated to try to do it like that. So yeah, you're talking about likely needing the whole team all at once, which means you're generally going to need time to hire them all, get them trained, get them up and going, especially on the support staff side, because timing and all of this court process don't care that it takes us time to get there. So yeah, I would look at it. I think it's a great analogy. It is probably more like a fire station. Great. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Cavanagh.
Oh, I know we've got PD that has, I think, 20-something slides. I want to do a pulse check with council. We anticipate maybe taking a break if people are hungry, so we can do that. We can continue through. I just wanted to touch base with you all.
It looks like the police department is saying, take a break.
Okay, then, Mr. Mayor, if we can take maybe a 10-minute break, council can use the facilities, grab a quick piece of pizza, and then we can get right back into it.
We'll be back at 6:15. All right, council, we will slowly come back from recess and continue with our police department and Chief Ambassador JF.
Mayor, members of the council, first off, thank you for having us here to present our CFP to you. Just so you know, I'm actually going to have Captain Coliani present it. He is getting to retire, going to retire April 30th. So I thought what better reminder for him that he's making the right decision than to have to present CFP. So he'll be coming up shortly after me. I do have to say this though. The one thing I got from Bill Nary's presentation that I thought was amazing was he compared firemen to attorneys. And I can say police feel the same about both. So real quick, just to lay a little bit of foundation for the police department and when it comes to CFP and the things that we're asking for, the one thing that the police department will always prioritize over FTEs is compensation and benefits for the current employees that we do have. And in today's market, that is one of the things that we feel very strongly about is taking care of those employees that have shown us the dedication over the years and have stuck with us through the fat times and the thin times. We've had lots of talks over the last few months over positions, and so I just want to touch on that briefly before Captain Coliani comes up. So you know we currently have 9 officers in the field training officer program. That's the 14 weeks after the academy. So hopefully they will all complete that successfully. If they do, at this point, we would currently have 14 openings. With the upcoming academy in April, that would drop us to 10 openings with the people that are slated to go to the academy. However, with 3 impending retirements coming up, by May, we'll be back up to 13 openings. So the one thing that I really do want to point out, though, is we do not and will not lower the quality of police officers candidates that we are hiring. And I have 2 recent examples of this. We had a candidate recently in the background with us who during our background investigation was actually fired from their employee for committing what would be considered a felony crime. The employee did not want to prosecute them, but they did terminate them. I can tell you that a neighboring agency recently hired that individual, knowing fully what we found in our background as well. And on top of that, we've had lots of people come to us and say you should easily be able to fill your positions with laterals. And I also have a recent example of that where we were doing a background on a lateral police officer, already certified police officer from another state. And during that background investigation, we came across an internal affairs investigation that had been done on that employee. We took the totality of that investigation to our local prosecuting attorney's office, presented it to them, and they pointed out to us that if we were to hire this individual, they would be immediately placed on a Brady list. And to explain to you who don't understand what a Brady list is, it's basically a list of somebody who has either withheld information or been untruthful during an investigation. And if you are on that Brady list, depending on the level of that, if you're still employed, every investigation that you testify, every case that you testify in, we have to present that information to a defense attorney who then gets to go before a judge and have a complete hearing on whether or not that can come into court. And we passed on that individual as well because we don't believe that we should take on that burden as a community, and we don't believe that we should place that burden on our prosecutors either. I will tell you that a local agency in this valley also hired that individual fully knowing the information that we had uncovered because they did come and interview our background investigators and looked at all of that. And even with the information provided to them of what our prosecuting attorneys had told us, they chose to go ahead and hire that individual. And I say this because maybe sometimes our standards are a contributing factor to some of our vacancies. But I certainly believe that it would be unfair to the officers that we have that are doing the job that they are doing every day and to our community if we were to bring those individuals into the Meridian Police Department. And we just will not do that. And I will finish with this to show you kind of what the state of trying to hire police officers is. When we opened up police officer positions in October of 2024, to date, we've only had 166 applications. We opened a records clerk position on February 11th, 2025, and we already have 111 applications. So the landscape for policing is not changing when it comes to the difficulty in hiring and finding people to just put in to do the job, but then to make sure that the people that we're hiring are the right people for the Meridian Police Department and our community. So with that, I will have Captain Coliani come up and kind of his final hurrah, I guess, for budgeting.
Yeah, we're not going to let this be your last one, so don't worry.
That's fair, Rock. Mr. Mayor, council members, thanks for having me up. I think it's already been said by Todd and Lieutenant Overton. I'm so used to that. Councilman Overton, and I think Council Cabinet of kind of teeing this up of what our CFP encompasses. But just to back up a little bit. So when this came out, how long's it been, Todd? 8 years? It's been a while. I begrudgingly engaged in this process. But having been in it for the last several years, this is a fantastic tool for us. It is a great communication tool. It's a great tool administratively for us. We were able to put in some strategies and some things and model things over the course of 10 years of what we think policing will look like. And we do that through the captains here and the chief and all our support staff to kind of understand, hey, what is it we're going to need now and in the future? And this tool allows us to do that without taking into consideration the costs. Obviously, that's your role. It's the city's role based upon growth and the things that you do. So we look at our own strategic plan. So we have our own strategic plan at the police department that goes from 2024 to 2027. We take a look at what we put in there and what it is we want to accomplish in that timeline. So some of that information that goes into our CFP comes from there. Some of it comes from the city side. Priority-based budgeting, Todd talked a little bit about that. We look at what programs do we have? Well, we have a pretty robust crime prevention program, drug prevention program, a lot of things that we do in-house, youth summits, all sorts of things. And so those things always have to be planned out for us now and in the future. And then, just today, we spent the better part of an hour talking about FTEs and technology. That kind of push and pull of where we need to be in the next few years. FTEs are expensive. You've heard how hard they are to hire. What if there's a way to leverage technology? Whether it be artificial intelligence, whether it be a program software, there are ongoing costs and technology is expensive. But is there a better way to do our job and be more efficient? And so we have those conversations all the time. And then quite frankly, the way our police department looks is based upon the decisions that you make. Land use decisions, things that are approved that are built in the city. You build the shields, they build it, and suddenly we have 200 calls to date there for shoplifting, for fraud, for problems. We build a village, we need police. So if you approve stuff, that's what's needed to service it. We don't have a huge downtown yet. It's coming. We're not an entertainment destination like Nampa and Garden City and Boise with sports and music venues. It'll probably grow into that, but a lot of our policing is structured around the way the city is now with parks, subdivisions, and strip retail and such. So all that goes into our decision to how this looks. So our first one up here is a CID OPS administrative assistant. We had initially two these FTEs in our CFP, but we cut it to one to save costs. So there are close to 20-some detectives in our detective division. We have them in property crimes, person crimes, and our impact unit. And then we have the OPS side of the house, which is hiring, which we have a couple of people in. They spend a lot of time administratively doing things that we feel could be done by another position at a less cost instead of tying up all their time doing those administrative functions. And I'm not going to read every one of these slides. I just gave you some very high-level stuff to look at. But we believe this will allow us to move quicker through backgrounds and building packets for detectives and doing those things that'll allow them to spend their time where it's needed. Police officers, I think you're all familiar or should be with our PAM model, police allocation model. If you're not and you want to see our police allocation model, we can share it with you. I have the two captains are here tonight. Our support services commander, Peachin's here tonight. If you have any questions, we can answer right away. This particular request in 2026, I don't know if you'll see it. Our PAM modeling looks like we're at 0 or 1 because growth has slowed down, and that's part of our modeling. Calls, response, the characteristics that we look at, all the different things inside the PAM modeling are trending towards 1 or 0 positions there this year. And but we do put them in our CFP as placeholders. So they're there, they're kind of a marker, they're kind of calling out where we need to pay attention to when we need to model each year. A response and rescue vehicle, this is a one-time cost. There is some fuel and ongoing costs. This is a piece of safety equipment that we need for our staff in the field. We do have a van that has some armor on it, but we learned this year when we used it to pin a car, it caused quite a bit of damage to it, and we lost it for several months. And so we had no armored rescue vehicle for our staff or for any type of call that we would need it in. This particular vehicle would have a different armor, it would have different capabilities that we don't have now. To deploy gas if we need to properly pin a vehicle, to do things that we just don't have that capability now. And quite honestly, when you need something like this, it's very difficult to go get it from somebody else. We have to go up to the airport or clear out to Star to try and get somebody else's. And so it makes more sense for us to have this for ourselves in our agency. Motorcycle, we're looking to add a flexible motorcycle to our fleet. Sometimes when our bikes go down, we're unable to put that person back in any other type of motorcycle because we don't have a spare one. So this would allow us this for repairs, maintenance, if it's wrecked, and it just keeps our traffic guys out doing the traffic things that we need to do in the city. Design fees for phase 3. This would be the final phase of the Public Safety Training Center complex that's on our main campus. These numbers have actually come, I believe, from Todd over time, where we've modeled this. When we did our 2022 CFP, we kind of looked at square footage. Yeah. And so these costs probably drift up a little bit each year, but to design the North Precinct was $596,000. So we're anticipating $655,000 as an estimate of what it would cost to design this if we were to move forward on this. 2 detectives in 2027. We did some modeling with Pam and detectives as well in a sense that we looked at cases and what type of cases we're doing there. They're often very complex, sophisticated. They take a lot of resources and time. You know, talking about cybercrime, organized crime, Bitcoin, all those types of things. And we need a couple more detectives in that unit in the next few years. Community service officer with a vehicle. This program has been wildly successful. If you've been here long enough, we started with 2. And the goal is to relieve some of that administrative routine calls for officers that would then free them up to take calls for service that require a police officer. They do a lot of the cold calls for us, walk-in reports, VIN inspections, found property, and it's a better use of personnel. They're easier to hire, they're quicker to hire, they're cheaper to hire, train, and equip. It's a home run, and so we're up to 8 of these now. We even use them in detectives, and we think we can continue over time as the city grows, leverage more and more of these types of positions rather than adding police officers, which you've heard are expensive and hard to hire. Specialty vehicle technician. This is something that we've been looking at for several years. I don't know if 2027 is the right spot for it. It is just a placeholder for us. But we're looking at bringing some cost savings in-house by bringing in our own technician to outsource upfitting and repairing vehicles. we've done some rough projections of what it would look like if we did it, most recently in 2023 and 2024. You can kind of see that there. They could also serve other departments like fire and public works of upfitting some of their vehicles, kind of paving the way and maybe starting something that we could do citywide. We think it'd be a quicker turnaround for us. We use a vendor now, but we have to share that vendor with everybody else in the valley, and it is a slow process to get our vehicles outfitted and on the road. Here is the actual Public Safety Training Center Phase 3. It would be a combination of impact fee and capital dollars. I don't know in the impact fee, Todd could probably speak to this, or we could research it, what we have in there now for the police side of the house. But the estimated cost, 17,000 square feet, $11 million. And it's right now, we dropped it into 2027. This would be the last building on our campus there, and that would complete the build out of our Public Safety Training Center. And we would obviously have to scope it and what do we want it to look like and do, but we run police and fire academies now at our main building. It really wasn't built and set up to run academies. There are no locker rooms in that building. They're just classrooms. So this would cover some of that. We would have locker rooms, additional mat rooms and briefing rooms and stuff that we would envision doing there. Again, this is a placeholder for 2028. We would obviously model PAM in this year to see if there's a need for officers at that time. We have a school resource officer that we put in as a placeholder. We've been approached a couple of times by Compass and Gem Prep, the academy schools, about their need and want to add an SRO to their school. There's been some discussions initially back and forth about them wanting one. Is one enough for that many schools, or is it better for two? The challenge has always been is we have to hire officers to staff the street first, and we got to make sure we're good there before we can put more people in schools. There is a cost share here, and so there is help on that end from the schools, and they're willing to do that. Those discussions take place every year to see if we can make this work for them, and we're continuing to do that. Mental health manager, this one will change over time. It's programmed for 2028, but as you know, a vast majority of what we do is crisis calls. People that, whether it be addiction or mental illness or a combination thereof, we have been wildly successful in hiring a mental health manager and pairing them with a couple officers to respond to these calls in the community. The community has asked that we do this. They want mental health workers helping mental health and trying to keep the police out of that and finding them resources and keeping them attached to resources. I could see this being downgraded to like a clinician, which would cost less money. We would still have a mental health manager who we have now, but we would have a clinician level person. So we could cover 7 days a week. We don't have 7 days a week coverage now, but we have 7 days a week calls now. And so the equal, or the spreading this out of trying to provide that equal treatment for all our citizens is short right now. So we program that in. And then this is just a tenant improvement. If we were to move forward with the building of our final phase of the Public Safety Training Center, we would need to come back in and obviously got the locker rooms and kind of reconfigure inside of the main building. That's what these costs are. And so we put in a placeholder of some design fees for 2028 for $400,000 if we move forward on that. And then you can see here, we get way out. This gets really way out there, but we're anticipating needing more records staff as we build out in the Northwest precinct area with homes and all those things out there. You're going to see those lobby visits go up and up and up. And so we have built in a couple of positions here. NIBR's one, records, they kind of do the same thing. They're interchangeable, but we've anticipated that we'll need those by that time. Another placeholder that we've talked about, we would model in 29. Here's the tenant improvement to the main building. If we were to move forward on that in 2029, we would use capital dollars, and then we would do some reconfigure the bathrooms and locker rooms and repurpose those areas in that building. 2030, a fleet and building services assistant. So this is something we looked at quite a few years ago. And as the department grows, as the city grows, is there going to be a need for something a little bit more robust to maintain our fleets, fleet management, all that kind of stuff at a much bigger level than we have now. We have, Stacy, how many vehicles total? 105 vehicles we have just now. And so there's a lot of moving pieces, and there's, you know, one or two people handling 100 warranties, lube oil and filters, repairs, buying, purchasing, doing all these things. And so as we grow, there may be a strong interest. The city may grow organically into having its own fleet program too. That's a whole different conversation, but we have put a placeholder in there. Another placeholder for Pam. Deputy chief and police vehicle in 2031. So working with the chief, depending on the growth of the city and the growth of the department, there would be a need to align this to have a deputy chief in a position in the department. It just makes sense as we get bigger, the way things would be split up and how the organization grows. Code enforcement, we haven't had a code enforcement officer in quite a while. We have one programmed in 2033. That's just where it sits now. Right now, they're running several hundred cases a piece. Ideally, they should be around 600. They're handling over 900. Something to keep in mind with code, although they don't do a lot of emergency types of calls for service, we do need to keep in mind that if we add any type of parking program downtown, whether it be residential, if you don't want to go to meters, or a parking garage and you want us to handle it, it's going to take people. It's going to take people. And so code and CSO is typically what does that. So, you know, have a holistic look at when we want to do something like that of how it affects us on the downside. Police recruiter and vehicle, we quite honestly had this way up the list of important things, and we've moved it down to 2034 because we just don't know. I don't even know that we can hire another police officer right now, given the environment we're in. We have to be able to staff our street before we can add this. And there may be a better way to do this. So we're discussing internally, is it a sworn position? Is it a non-sworn position? Do we spend dollars and hire a firm to do recruiting for us? Does that work? And so we're still going through that process, trying to figure out what that looks like. Investigation analyst, this was another one we had up in 2026, and we've moved it way out. We are currently in the process of trying to reimagine a crime analysis unit. We have done visits to the Boise Police Department, the Ada County Sheriff's Department, and the Nampa Police Department to see how they do crime analysis. And quite frankly, we think we can do it better. We're trying to reimagine it, trying to resource what we have now and leverage technology and move these FTEs maybe into different divisions to help out those divisions rather than having a unit, and maybe save some costs with FTEs and not filling them. We're not there yet, but we've been moving through that process for the last 6 months or so before we jump in and try and fill any more positions or ask for anything. It's just, we can do it better. And so we're going to spend some time looking that out, and you'll hear more about that in the future. That's what we have now. I will just close with this. If you have any questions, we can bring some people up and answer, or I have Burl scribing if you have something we want to follow up on later that we need to research for you all. We are going to look at everything we can technology-wise, real-time crime centers, drone response programs, you know, those things that we think we can utilize in the future, that we can imagine what policing is going to be like, what we need, that kind of tug and pull of FTEs versus technology. It's all money. We understand that. We understand money's limited. We understand that it could be tight for a few years, but we are having those conversations. We are beta testing right now a report writing software program where the program will actually take what was recorded on the body camera, and you press a button and it literally goes through and writes the report. Awesome. There's some work that goes into it that the officer still has to do to make sure it is a factual basis of what took place. That is an example of how we can save time. And right now we're beta testing this, and it looks like we can save, what was the number? 20 minutes?
Our beta test showed that we were saving 21 minutes a report, which would come out to about $123,000 worth of man hours saved. So we're also reaching out to some different agencies that have already adopted this, and believe it or not, their chiefs are telling me, it's amazing, the reports are better than the ones my officers were writing, go figure. But when we've beta tested it, we've had about a 91% accuracy rate on the first draft. The system's called Draft One. And so you go in and you fix what needs to be fixed, which is what cleans that up for you. So we're looking at those. Some agencies are showing over 30 minutes of saved time per report. So very promising, and it's already been accepted into several of the courts throughout the country. So that's also a benefit for us.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilwoman Strader.
Thank you so much. This is great. I really appreciate, I know Anne has also, because we talk a lot in this committee, had mentioned a lot about the technology that you were looking at, and I think that's a really good way to drive operational efficiency. A question for you, maybe two different questions. One question is, so the PAM model is going to determine our current needs. Do you have an ability to project in the PAM model into the future based on different growth assumptions? The reason I'm asking is, we have this pattern of, at least in the CFP from what I have seen now, it's like, 2 officers per year, then you'll see 2 detectives. It's kind of a regular pattern. Obviously, if the projections came true and growth was slowing, we would still need to add positions because we're still growing. But fundamentally, if that rate of growth changes a lot, how and when do you reflect that in the PAM model?
Well, the PAM takes into consideration, it takes into consideration a lot of different things. It takes into undedicated time. It takes into our calls for service, how often you want officers on certain roadways, like you want them in the subdivisions once a week, right? You want them on the main surface roads every 2 hours. There's a lot of modeling that we do that can influence what that looks like. And so we spend time working with, this is probably not the best way to explain it, but we spend time working with our, Amy's her name, and she comes in and she's a PhD and she puts all this modeling together based on our assumptions. So do they go up and down based upon if growth slows? Yeah, growth slows. Calls for service, they slow. They do influence each other, but we dictate that based upon what our modeling looks like. Does that make sense?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilwoman Strader.
Yeah, I think it does. So you have the component, I guess maybe maybe we could follow up afterward, but I would be curious if you can use the model to project forward. So if up until now, it's like, this has been the need with this level of growth, we've needed to add 2 positions every year, at least of sworn officers. At what point would the model tell you, or would you change your approach where it's like, how would we know, okay, we think that fundamentally the rate of growth has shifted. So now we think maybe it's instead of 4 officers every 2 years, maybe it's 3 officers every 2 years. How do you see that change in the environment reflected in the PAM model? Or at what point would the CFP be updated based on new growth assumptions?
I think some of that is really driven by land mass. So they look at the number of miles that we have in roadways, and all of those things are added into the model. So if we take that the city can never grow past this size, they can probably start to predict with some rate of accuracy on what that growth looks like. We still are going to have to deal with what do calls for service look like? Are those going up? And we use the PAM model every year. Sometimes we've said, oh, we think we're going to need 3 more officers or 2 more officers. And then we come back and they say, no, you only need 1. Or no, you don't need any. And then we don't ask for those officers. But I don't know how far out you can really accurately make that prediction. That's pretty difficult. I think when you start looking at the types of calls, if our types of calls change, certainly that may change the number of officers you want on your roadways and out there working the streets.
Thank you. I had one more quick question.
Councilwoman Strader.
Thank you, if that's okay. Really, so we have seen this in the CFP in a couple different formats where people are thinking, okay, it's time to start bringing more in-house from a vehicle perspective. I've also heard that Kendall's is expanding quite a bit. I think it's Kendall's, if I've got that right, but which I believe is a pretty large shop that can now service larger vehicles and so forth. So we're just kind of a general question, you know, if we're looking at that as an alternative, because the operating costs, right, of hiring permanent employees is pretty high. Hello, Stacy.
Mayor, Council, I have not been contacted by Kendall about upfitting our vehicles. They
Okay,
do repairs
right.
and maintenance to general equipment that the car is built with from Ford, but they don't repair our police equipment.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that's true. The reason I was asking about it is I heard that they have increased their capabilities. So that's why I was just curious. But it sounds like we'll just,
Happy to reach out to them and find out if they've got something that I'm not familiar with yet.
couldn't hurt,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, thank you so much.
I think there's the differences. What you're talking about for the position is primarily based upon putting in all the equipment and other things that Kindle doesn't necessarily do. They have created a fleet services center, which they can do wraps, they can do certain components, but
Window tint, correct.
Mm.
Like you said, vehicle wraps, and they will take care of companies, businesses that have large volume of fleet, large vehicles that require larger bays. They have multiple trucks, vans, things like that. They're able to push those through faster than they were in their regular service center.
Thank you. I think that's great. It's good to have as part of just keeping our eye on the whole landscape because it sounded like they have expanded significantly and may want to expand their capabilities. So maybe worth a conversation in the interim period while we're kind of trying to figure this out. Thank you.
One thing that I don't know if you noticed that wasn't in here that we didn't model, throwing a log on the fire here, is animal control. So we have in the past had finance kind of build us what it would cost if we wanted to bring that in-house. We have left that out of our modeling because we'd simply have to know a lot more information to really do it accurately. So there's nothing in there. You know, Bill has modeled prosecution, bring that in-house. Animal control is another one that we outsource and spend some money on. If we were to bring that in, what that would cost in terms of facilities, FTEs, and right now it is very expensive because it would be very similar to a fire station, right? They're not going to let us keep our toe kind of in and out. If we're out, and we can't use them at all, everything's on us. And so we haven't modeled that at all. That would take quite a bit of work and probably a group of people to put that together to see what kind of service you want. So I close with that, and if there's any other questions,
council, additional questions?
appreciate it.
Mayor,
Oh, you're not done.
just a can of worms.
Councilman Whitlock.
Let me open a can of worms before you leave, Captain. Just reflecting back on our citizens survey and what they want and desire in our community. One of the recurring comments was, when are we getting to do something about all these people running red lights?
Yeah.
And do we have anything in here in terms of, is that a personnel thing or is it a technology thing that we need to?
Yes. So it's a legislative thing. We're not allowed to have red light cameras, right? I don't foresee the state legislature opening up that for us. Red lights are a very difficult thing. It takes a lot of manpower to work a red light intersection and running red lights to effectively do it and write tickets. It doesn't mean it can't be done. We do it, but it is very difficult. Traffic is, I mean, if you can imagine working red lights at Eagle and Fairview, you know, you have to place officers in strategic locations to be able to see the lights, to see how fast these cars are going. When does the light actually turn red as they enter the intersection? You know, did they have time to slow down? There's a lot of things you have to check there to write those tickets, and we do write them. And we constantly get it. And then trust me, when we do it, the next comments that come into our feed at the police department is, why don't you guys do something besides write people tickets? Why don't you go out and fight true crime, right? So we get it from both sides, from the people that see it. I mean, I live it. I live in the community too. And so on my days off, I see it. It's hard. I thought that was going to be really rough.
Mr. Mayor, you're not done yet.
Okay.
Councilman Little Roberts.
First of all, I just want to say thank you to all the captains and the chief for the hours and hours of conversation that go on regarding how can we do things better. But first and foremost, you're always concerned with the staff that you have. And that just, I think, is just never wavering and is very impressive. So no questions, just wanted to say thank you.
Appreciate it.
And thank you, since I've got the mic, for all your years of service.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm not gone yet.
Well, appreciate it. And I'm just going to end on this, that while technology may play a big part, if I ever see anything called omni consumer products on the list of vendors, we're out. If you don't know, go look at the 1990 movies and figure out where what Omni brought us into the police scene. RoboCop. No RoboCop in Meridian. Yet.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Shader.
I did just want to make a quick thank you because I think we're in the thank you phase, but I wanted to give a shout out to all the department directors and employees who helped with the CFP so far because it's been a lot of work. And I know this year has not been the easiest with a new process. And I wanted to thank Anne especially for just having such a heart of gold to help when we're still in the middle of it. We're going to keep doing it for a few more weeks. And then finally, I think finance and Todd's team, they always do a phenomenal job, but this has been, a very labor intensive effort. And I just really wanted to say how much we appreciate everybody that's helping with this critical planning process.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
one other final comment here. I'd first like to thank Liz and Ann for their hard work trying to take this process and reach it out to 3 years to try to make the fund balance work. That's not easy. But on the flip side, I want to make sure that we continue to encourage all of our directors, command staff, managers, and supervisors to continue to never get frustrated by the items that might get pushed out on this 10-year plan looking into the future, but to continue to think of where we're going to go and how we're going to do it. And don't let the process be foiled by the fact that we might have to eliminate stuff. Continue to look down the road positively and encourage your staff to, because we need those great ideas. We don't need them to be stifled so we don't see them and know that they're available to us. So we have to work both sides. One, make sure we can pay for it, and one, make sure we continue to reach out to our best and get those great ideas and have them included on that list.
Thank you. All right. With that, we'll move on to item 26, which is ordinance number 25-2073. Ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. An ordinance Apex Scenic H 2024-0052 for rezone for parcel of land being all of Government Lot 4 and a portion of Government Lot 5 of Section 6, Township 2 North, Range 1 East, Boise, Meridian, City of Meridian, Ada County, Idaho. More particularly described in Exhibit A, rezoning 71.44 acres of land from the R4 zoning district to the CG zoning district in the Meridian City Code, directing city staff to alter all applicable use and area maps as well as the official zoning maps and all applicable official maps depicting the boundaries and the zoning districts of the city of Meridian in accordance with this ordinance, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Treasurer, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Council, you've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody that would like it read in its entirety? If not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
I move that we approve ordinance number 25-2073.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 25-2073. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Taylor.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strader.
Aye.
Whitlock.
All ayes, motion carries. The item is agreed to. Next up is item 27, which is ordinance number 25-2074. Ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. An ordinance Apex Scenic H 2024-0052 annexing a parcel of land located in the east half of the northwest quarter of Section 6, Township 2, North Range 1 East, Boise, Meridian, Ada County, Idaho, more particularly described in Exhibit A, rezoning 77.71 acres of such real property from the RUT to CG zoning districts, directing city staff to alter all applicable use and area maps as well as official zoning maps and all official maps depicting the boundaries and the zoning districts of the city of Meridian in accordance with this ordinance, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Treasurer, and the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, repealing conflicting ordinances and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Council, you've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody that would like it read in its entirety? If not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
move that we approve ordinance number 25-2074.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 25-2074. Is there discussion on the motion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh,
Aye.
Little Roberts, Taylor,
Aye.
Overton,
Aye.
Strader,
Aye.
Whitlock.
All ayes, motion carries, and is agreed to. Next item up is executive session.
Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
we go into excuse me, we go into executive session pursuant to Idaho State Code 74-2061F.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to go into executive session. Is there discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh,
Aye.
Little Roberts, Taylor,
Aye.
Overton,
Aye.
Strader,
Aye.
Whitlock.
All ayes, motion carries, and we'll move into executive session.
I got it. come out of executive session.
Motion is second to come out of executive session. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We're out of executive session.
Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Or adjourn, just want to remind council, Friday in the morning is the FFA breakfast over at Meridian High. With some pancakes, sausage, eggs, it's all there and they're hosting us, so it's a good event. I encourage you to go. With that, Mr. Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
Have a motion and a second to adjourn, and the proclamation will be read at 7 a.m. if you want to be present. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.